Bueno, good morning. Buenos días, Jeffrey.
Buenos
Welcome.
días. Gracias.
El stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias a todos y buenos días a todos. It's a great pleasure and honor to be part of the conference today. Thank you for your leadership on this crucial issue. We've all been in an intensive graduate course in sustainable development in recent weeks. I think everybody has been looking at the Glasgow conference, the day-by-day negotiations, the statements, the fears, the red alerts, the clash points, and I will try to spend just a few minutes to put this in perspective and to talk about the context for Latin America and for the steel industry. COP26 reflected a global reality, which is that we're in trouble. We're in trouble because what we thought was the right way to run an economy on fossil fuel, what was the great breakthrough of modern history, in fact, turns out to be increasingly dangerous. There's nothing intrinsically evil about fossil fuels, but it turns out that they have chemical properties that are very dangerous. And this was not known when James Watt invented the steam engine or when Daimler and Benz invented the internal combustion engine. We didn't know that the accumulation of carbon dioxide from burning fossil fuel would come to endanger the planet. We have learned that over recent decades. It was doubted at first by many people, especially by the industry themselves, who said, how could our energy, which is so vital for the world, be dangerous? Of course, this is not right. But the evidence has mounted, and we are all living now ourselves every day, each year, in increasing global disruption from climate. And the scientists are completely sure that humanity has disrupted the planet in a very dangerous way. I can tell you, I led an institute at Columbia University with several hundred climate scientists for many, many years. They would not let me sleep comfortably at night because they told me all the time, this is more dangerous than you realize. This is getting out of hand faster than you think. And I can tell you for the last 20 years, everything that they have told me has been correct. We are in trouble. So the world met in Glasgow, or I should say our governments, and I should say even in particular, our diplomats met in Glasgow over the last couple of weeks. They didn't solve everything they needed to solve, but I think we can take some lessons from what happened. First, there is no going back on the need to decarbonize. This will intensify year after year because it's not based on theory. It's not based on particular interests. It's actually a reflection of a worldwide crisis. And that crisis is going to get worse, I'm sorry to tell you, year by year. We will have more heat waves, more droughts, more storms, more floods, more massive forest fires in the coming years because Earth will continue to warm quite rapidly, maybe at the rate of 0.3 degrees Celsius each decade, possibly even faster. And this means we could even hit the 1.5 degree Celsius limit, supposed limit, within a few years, within a decade. So this is why this issue is not going away. Second, you could see even countries you would not expect to make pledges to decarbonize did so. So Russia pledged to decarbonize. Saudi Arabia, of all countries, the center of world oil production, pledged to decarbonize. Most of the world pledged to decarbonize. Even the most resistant country in the conference, I would say, India, pledged to decarbonize by 2070. Too late, but they pledged to decarbonize. And the reason is, again, there's no denying the essentials on this. This was agreed. The conference concluded with lots of uncertainty and dissension, especially because the rich countries really are unfair, They caused the crisis. They promised to help pay for it. They don't pay for it. They're greedy. I'm talking about my own country first, by the way. The rich do not want to share. They do not want to contribute. They do not want to pay taxes. They run our politics in the United States. So this is the real reason why this conference had so much dissension, because the rich are incredibly greedy. But it doesn't mean that the climate crisis is going to go away. It means that it's going to intensify. And these battles of who's going to pay, how much the rich countries are going to contribute when these losses continue to mount, well, that fight definitely is going to continue. But I would say that have no doubt we're moving to decarbonization. And I think the conference is based completely on that theme correctly. Now, another thing we learned from the conference, our governments by and large don't know what to do. They're not very competent, actually, I'm sorry to say. They don't really have detailed plans. So they make pronouncements. Some of them made pronouncements without any plans at all. Some have made some plans. Most do not have detailed pathways to get to net zero. And there was a lot of rhetoric, well, the private sector will get there, or we put a carbon price on and then let the markets operate. This will not work. The world will not succeed unless there is proper public policy. And that's because the changes that are needed require massive decisions about land use, new power transmission systems, new allocations of public land in order to build renewable energy at a very large scale, at a very rapid rate. New decisions about hydrogen, which will be very important for the steel industry. All of that requires public policy. And those policies are not really in place in most of the world. Europe is in the lead. Most of the world is lagging behind. In the United States, we're so pathetic that we can't get a vote through Congress right now on these things because we're still politically in the hands of the oil and gas industry. But it's going to come. Even in the United States, it's going to come. But no way that industry can make this adjustment without absolutely having a framework of public policy. And Maximo was very clear on that and very right when he talked about the need for a flexible and fluid dialogue between industry and government. Exactly right. There need to be pathways and plans to get this done properly. So this is a point that I would really emphasize needs to be put in place. I'm waiting for, of course, my own country, which is a little pathetic politically right now, but all other countries as well, to make proper pathways. Every government's supposed to do this, by the way, under the Paris Agreement. They're supposed to present long-term strategies. Incidentally, long-term means to 2050. It's only 22 years away. It's 28 years away. It's shocking. Long-term doesn't mean long-term. It means short-term these days. But every government's supposed to present these plans. As you know, this will require deep technological transformation. Steel will be made in different ways. And be sure, look at what's happening in Sweden right now. Look at what's happening in Northern Europe, which usually is a bellwether because they're typically 10 or 20 years ahead of the rest of the world on these changes. They've been at it longer. They have very good governance. They proceed in the proper way. So when we look to what's happening in Northern Europe, we get a glimpse of the future. They're moving to hydrogen-based steel production, and they're moving quickly. And Europe, of course, is going to adopt carbon border adjustment mechanisms. In other words, tariffs that are going to be based on the imputed carbon emissions of the products sold in the European market. So steel producers that are producing steel the old-fashioned way are going to find increasing barriers to global markets. This is for sure. This is going to spread around the world. And so this is another point. Technology transformation, don't be left behind, because this is on its way. There will be sector-wide strategies. So be part of the global steel discussion, of course. I don't have to tell you that. But a lot will be done on a sector basis. You saw how US and EU agreed on a steel agreement. Doesn't have a lot of content yet. It's highly protectionist, by the way, maybe aimed especially at China. But eventually, the steel industry worldwide will coalesce around sector approaches for decarbonization to try to keep some kind of level playing field worldwide within the steel sector. So that's going to happen. Let me mention a few aspects. Maximo touched on many of them about the Latin American context in particular, and to do it briefly. First, of course, Latin America is a world region that is natural capital rich. This is obvious. Perhaps the richest region in the whole world in per capita natural wealth. By natural wealth, I include biodiversity, I include renewable energy potential, solar potential, wind, hydro potential, even sustainable biomass to some extent, because you have to be careful on biomass not to destroy the environment as you're harvesting the biomass, but huge renewable energy potential. The world's breadbasket, the world depends on South America to eat, and it will increasingly depend on South America because South America is a great grain producer, meat producer, and central to the global food supply. And of course, South America is a great minerals wealth, and a lot of the minerals that will be core to the sustainable economy. And that's very important as well, whether it's lithium or whether it's copper or other minerals that are vital for the energy transformation. So this is the absolutely positive side, that Latin America in general, South America in particular, is natural resource rich, and therefore can not only feed itself and feed the world, not only provide alternatives to fossil fuels, but actually fulfill the entire decarbonization agenda and play an extremely important role in the supply chains globally for the sustainable energy technologies, such as the battery supply chains for electric vehicles. Latin America has the advantage, it's an urban society, and that is also hugely positive because that will be able to use the new digital technologies and other technologies more favorably. But Latin America and South America in particular faces some very deep social challenges, which need to be recognized because they have to be part of the solution as well. Latin America, like the United States, is among the most unequal parts of the world, and we have political instability everywhere because of that very high inequality of wealth and income. We need to attend to it. It's time. I think the evidence is clear. When you have a Gini coefficient of 0.5, as Latin American and South American countries do, you cannot have political stability. There will be swings between left and right, and all sorts of problems. This is what the United States faces. We're not quite as unequal, but it's the inequality that leads to political disasters like Donald Trump. So that's one point. Second, education is not up to the challenge. And again, Maximo mentioned this, and I want to concur. Education is the single most important investment, even more important than renewable energy and other transformations. Get the children in school with quality education. Use every means available, augment it with online resources, ensure digital connectivity for all children, enhance the education. This is vital for society. It's vital for the success of the transformations. And third is the politics. The politics inside almost every country right now is fraught with division. The regional politics are highly fragmented and unstable. And yet the successful transformation, whether it's of the steel sector or the renewable energy more broadly, requires regional cooperation. No country can make this transformation on its own. South America should be thinking of a regional energy system, an interconnected grid of zero carbon power, a hydrogen economy that will be important for industry across the region. And that requires a lot of regional cooperation, as does saving the precious resource of the Amazon and the other ecosystems, great ecosystems of South America, which are vital, gorgeous, hugely valuable, totally irreplaceable, and under threat. So the regional cooperation is vital. Let me conclude by saying that what we learn from COP26 is not that we have solved this problem, but rather that we are in an intensified, urgent phase of global problem solving. It's complicated. It requires a new kind of politics. It requires a lot of globalization and regionalization. It requires a lot of expertise and technology. All of it is within reach. None of it is easy, but that's why we're here today. Thank you very much for enabling me to be part of this important conference.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeffrey. Thank you so much for your words. First of all, I would like to thank Alacero for the invitation to UNIDO, and Alejandro and team, and it was really refreshing to have Maximo's words and also get to learn about the last summit. And of course, Jeffrey, thanks so much for setting the tone to this meeting. Lots of things have been said, and I think we all expected from COP26 to be a great leap, and where we basically got this small step towards what we want. And I think the issue of building back and better and greener is right in the middle of the agenda. We want that. And we want COVID solidarity and climate justice, and that's something that is being claimed from the region, and understanding that the international community may not be in a position to actually provide the right funding for mitigation and adaptation efforts for a region that only generates 10% of the greenhouse gases in the world is something that needs to be taken into account. I think one of the issues, Jeffrey, that is being discussed down here is the issue of the trade-off between the economics, the environmental, and the social aspects of these major transformations. And I think that's something that industrialists in particular are very keen on. And the question is really a trade-off, or do the economic, environmental, and social agenda actually go in hand? From UNIDO's side, we actually see three major transitions that actually support this idea that the economy, the environment, and the social aspects actually sit together in the table, which basically is something really important, because all of these issues tend to be isolated by ministries, and they look at these things differently, and they have conflicts with each other. But at the end of the day, these three issues can actually reinforce each other. And I think from an environmentalist, for an industrialist viewpoint, it is very important to actually get some examples of how these three things go together. Let me provide some insights. And I think, Jeffrey, one of the issues that we should discuss later on is what this means in terms of policy. And I think the issue of industrial policy in particular, a concept that has been taboo for such a long time in the region, but now you've got one big country like the US embracing industrial policy like there's never been before. But let me talk about these three transitions or mega trends, as we call them. One is the energy transition towards renewable. I mean, this is a region that generates 25% of the 25% of the region's renewables actually come the region's energy comes from renewables. And the idea is that, you know, the targets is to reach 70% by 2030. Now, you would say that this could be compromising jobs in the fossil fuel industry, but in fact, what we actually get to see is that, you know, we are expecting a massive increase in jobs through this transformation towards renewable worldwide. In some countries, actually, they've moved into what they call the second energy transition, which is using the renewable energy surpluses that they generate to move into competitive prices for green hydrogen and so on and so forth. We see agendas like Chile and Uruguay hoping to develop GH2 for the coming 5 to 10 years. So we actually have a good trend towards this idea of the energy transition, with some countries moving towards a second energy transition. That's great news. The second element that I wanted to raise, and I think is strongly linked to the steel industry, and it's been said by Maximo before, is the circular economy and how the circularity can actually play a major role in the industry's competitiveness going forward. Let us not forget that there is a report produced by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation pointing that 45% of the GHG emissions actually come from how we make and consume products rather than the energy debate. And I think that's also very interesting because it really puts the blame not only on the fossil fuel industry, but also on consumers and industrialists themselves. So there's plenty of research being done on the economic benefits of circularity. I'm not going to get into that, but you know, certainly the 1.3 trillion euros that can be achieved in Europe is one example. But if we go into specificities as far as industry is concerned, and we move into the steel sector, we see, for instance, major savings in recycling steel, you know, up to 60-75%, which actually makes circularity not only environmentally sound, but also an important competitive element for the sector per se. And the third point that I wanted to raise is the issue of Industry 4.0 technologies. I mean, we see Industry 4.0 technologies as a way to speed up these two green transitions, both energy and circular economy. Specifically, we see it in 3D printing, for instance, how it helps waste, designing out waste in the construction sector, which is extremely relevant for steel. Smart waste management systems have been applied throughout the world, and so on and so forth. So these three transitions, they speak to the green sector in a sense that, you know, they speak to the decarbonization agenda, but at the same time, we actually see that they can also bring economic and social benefits. Now, we haven't spoken about the short-term costs of this transition. All these transitions have short-term costs for long-term returns. But I think, you know, these are the sort of issues that we should be putting on the table on you know, the different trade-offs. And I wanted to pick your brain, Jeffrey, just to continue the discussion on the policy space in which all these things can take place, you know, beyond the fact that, you know, we should be recognizing that the economic benefits and the social and environmental aspects go hand in hand. What sort of issues we should bring up in Latin America as far as policy is concerned? I think one issue is the return of industrial policy. And you've mentioned, some of the elements of the old-fashioned policy, which is, you know, let us move into a skill development and research and development. Let's not forget that this is one of the regions with one of the lowest R&D spendings in the world, you know, only 0.7% of GDP, with a very small contribution from the private sector. But, you know, what are the sort of issues, Jeffrey, do you see for the policy space to push for this decarbonization in the region?
Yeah, thanks, Manuel. And let me also pay a great tribute to UNIDO, which is really a great organization, UN Industrial Development Organization, which needs to be in the forefront right now. And I'm thrilled that we're going to be doing a project together. I lead a network of universities called the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and UNIDO and SDSN will be co-hosting a new council of engineers for the energy transition, and all the points you just mentioned on the second energy transition, circular economy, industry 4.0 technologies will be featured in this new council, which should be of service for every government. And of course, one of the aims is to help the UN to play the role that it can play. It is interesting, industrial policy. I think it's always been there, but rhetorically, the U.S. denied it a lot. But hard to see how creating the internet economy wasn't an industrial policy. It started in our Defense Department, after all, with DARPA, and creating modern genomics was a project of the National Institutes of Health in the United States. We always said, oh, we don't have industrial policy. But the fact of the matter, there was a lot of it. But it was China, really, that I think grabbed the reins in 2014 with Made in China 2025, where they listed 10 top sectors. We're going to reach the frontiers of that. That freaked out the American policymakers, by the way. And that opened up, again, explicit industrial policy in the United States. So President Biden's talking about, we need American supply chains for electric vehicles. We need American supply chains for all of these technologies. But I think the basic point is, when you're making a large-scale technology transformation, you need industrial policy, period. There's always government-led research and development that's needed. There's always public policy that needs to change. There's always early financing for demonstration that is important. And so industrial policy really is always there, even if you have a free market rhetoric. By the way, there was, of course, a famous Chilean finance minister more than 30 years ago who said, I don't care if we make transistor chips or potato chips, we're going to make chips. And I always thought that was wrong. I'd actually rather make transistor chips, microprocessors and so on. Those countries that did have soared in progress. And I think the point is, you need to have a vision. We're going to get into that cutting edge technology. Now, as you said, Manuel, the level of R&D spending in Latin America is really substandard. Middle income countries got stuck in part because they got not stuck on technology, but certainly didn't advance the way they should have. Whereas in East Asia, we know the line of sight of public policy was technology. And whenever I always said to my friends in both regions, when I was in East Asia, all they wanted to talk about was technology. When I was in Latin America, all they wanted to talk about was politics and maybe good music, culture, and so on. But the East Asians had their eye on technology as the core for long-term development. It's really paid off in a lot of ways. And I think South American countries really need to up their game in industrial policy. So that's one point. Second, I think we need, one of the things that happened in the early 1990s was the US and the World Bank said, close down your planning ministries. We don't need planning anymore. We just need markets. But actually, we need planning. And especially if you're going to make a 30-year transition from fossil fuel dependent to zero carbon energy systems, boy, do you need plans. You need to know where you're going. You need to know where public investments are needed. You need to know what's happening in the world in order to be part of that and not caught out. You need to planning to attract the kinds of technology and foreign investments, or make the investments in research and development. So we need planning ministries. Interestingly, the United States doesn't have any planning capacity. So it's strange. We don't have an economy ministry. We don't have a planning ministry. Jeffrey, and we're suffering because of that.
Manuel, I'm so sorry to interrupt so exciting conversation, but we have just 1 minute left, so I must you guys
I'll turn it back over to Manuel.
I'm so sorry. Please continue.
Thanks, Jeffrey. No, I just, just to wrap it up from my side, I just wanted to put on the table a few initiatives that we were actually running on decarbonization that I think speak to the policymakers and how we can actually look into specific policy interventions to support this transition. One of the things that we are working on is on green public procurement. I think one of the issues that we can address is what is the power of the government to actually dynamize somehow the market for these low market products, right? And green public procurement is one of the issues that is coming up very strongly. I think we also need to share risks. I think, Jeffrey, one of the issues with these transitions is that the risk associated to it, this is new to many industries, and business support schemes that finance this is something that we're working on. We've got programs on circular economy in Uruguay and so on and so forth, supporting this transition. And of course, the usual suspects, fiscal policies. I mean, we believe, that the application of VAT exemptions for the acquisition of green technology is a great example, but also, for instance, feed-in tariff or the shifting of taxes from labor to resources, that would be a game changer for the organization based on the natural resources that the region has. So these are the sort of things that we're working on. We have a great new program called the Industrial Deep Decarbonization Initiative that hopes to develop this market for low carbon steel and cement. And I think that's a great initiative by setting standards and also supporting governments in public procurement. And the second one is, of course, is a global program on green hydrogen just for decarbonization of industry. And this is something that we're pushing for, and we welcome the industrialists in Latin America to get close to UNIDO and get to learn about these things.
Yeah, congratulations. Okay. Let me,
guys,
by the way,
I'm
apologize
sorry.
for running onward.
Manuel, I'm so sorry, guys. I'm in a terrible position because, of course, we want to keep listening to you guys for much more time, but we need to follow our program. And I want to thank you, Jeffrey, Sachs, and Manuel Albaladejo. Thank you, guys, so much for your time and for your speech. Bye-bye.
Thank you.